So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to load our data into R and have a look at it and see how we can use the data to actually answer the questions. And so in this first video, there's a very specific thing I'm going to check, and that is I'm going to see how many calls we're getting in per day using the data. And I'm going to look at the variability of those calls over a day. Okay, so first thing is let's load the data into R. So we're going to use the read CSV command. It's already typed there. And you'll see it's quite a big file. So over there is a summary of the file. So we have about 57,000 observations, and we have 4 variables for our file. Okay, so if you actually look at it, just click on it there. Over here we can see our different variables. So we have the date that a call was made, the time that the call was made, starting at midnight, the client type, whether it was a platinum, silver, or gold client, and then whether that caller requested an agent or not. Okay, so in essence, we have a lot of categorical variables, and we have a few numerical variables as well. Okay, so first thing is I just want to get an idea of how many calls are we actually getting over our client base. So a few things that we know from our brief, from our lab instructions, is the number of clients that we currently have is about 75,000, and we expect that to grow to about 100,000. So we're going to use that values later on. Okay, so first thing first is I just want to see how many calls we're getting in, and I want to see how many calls we're getting in per day. So you'll see we have our date there, so there was all our calls on day 1. So it's quite a lot, and it goes on and on and on and on. Remember, we have over 57,000 records. So somewhere, okay, we're at afternoon now we're somewhere late afternoon, even later. So I mean, we can go on and on and on. So, and then eventually days 1 calls will end, and then days 2 calls will start. Okay, so if I want to look at the number of calls per day, I'm going to have to use this data of call variable. So what I want R to do for me is I want R to basically take each day, and then for each day, count the number of records that fall within the day. Okay, so that's pretty simple to do. We can just use this table command for that. So I'm going to say table, we're working with my data, and I want to see what the number of calls is per date. That's it. That's all I want to do. So I'm just going to say table, press that, and then I want the date of call. So that's what I want to see is happening at the moment. Okay, so let's run that, and that gives us our results. So it tells us how many calls we got on the different days of our study period. Okay, so it goes from the 2nd to the 31st, and we can see it's sort of 1,081 calls and 1,924 calls, and it goes on and on and on and on. So it's quite a lot of calls. So we can visually analyze this. So let's just say I want to get a bar plot of that table over there. So let's just copy that in there, and then we can actually see what it looks like. And there it shows the number of calls that we have. So there's our dates, that's the number of calls, and we can see there's some variance. Some day we have more calls than others, but it's fairly consistent. There's not a big difference in the number of calls that we're actually experiencing. So in this case, we might actually get away with using one value as the number of calls, maybe inflate it a bit, and then based on that we can actually calculate our resource requirements. Okay, so let's get some actual numbers. So I'm gonna save that table as an object. So let's say n calls per month is equal to table, that one over there. Okay, so we can save it, and now we can do some summary statistics on it. So it's quite tempting to just say, please give me a summary of that table and see what R does. So if you run that, it gives you this pretty much useless information. It just tells you that the number of cases in the table is 67,000 and the number of factors is 1. Okay, so this doesn't help us out at all. R is treating that table as a table, exactly what it is. It's not really treating it as a number. So to force R to treat it as a number, I'm just going to use a fancy command, and I'm going to say, R, please treat this as a numeric number. So R will then take that table, convert it to a numeric number, and then we can look at the summary stuff. So let's press run, and that looks a lot better. So there we have our mean. We're getting about 1,900 calls in per day. The maximum was 1,948, minimum 1,822, and we'll see we have quite a small range. So the range within which about 80 or about 50% of our values fall is 12 calls. So there's a very small range considering that we're working with about 2,000 calls. Okay, so this information we can use. We can actually use it directly. So as I shown in the previous introduction, we actually have a good idea of how many calls we're getting in per day. So we can see we're getting about 1,900 calls in per day. So let's use this number and see what percentage of our customers actually call in per day. Okay, so let's say mean calls per day is equal to the mean of that table there. This value over here. Okay, so let's just make sure that's correct. Mean calls per day is equal to 1,800. Yep, that's right. That's the same that R gave us there. And we know we've got 7,000 or 75,000 customers. Okay, so we want an idea of what percentage of that customer is actually calling during a day. And that's simply our mean calls per day divided by number of clients or number of customers. So if you calculate that, not found because I haven't run that yet. Now I should find it. There it shows us that about 2.5% of our clients are actually phoning in over the course of a day. Okay, so this value is pretty useful. We can use that value when we look at how many calls we're expecting to get in once we grow our customer base to 100,000 clients. Okay, so like I said, it's useful, so we just can save this. So let's say we're going to call this the percentage of customers that phone is equal to that value. So let's just check that it's correct. And now we can say, okay, how many calls do we expect if our customer base is 100,000? So again, we're saying that 25,000 new customers are going to behave like our current customers. So they're also going to phone in per day. And we can expect about 2.5% of those new customers to actually phone in over the course of a day. Okay, so n calls per day new is going to be that per customer one over there multiplied by our n number of clients new, that one over there. Okay, so run that quickly. And we see that n calls per day new is going to be 2,531. So if we have 100,000 customers, then we expect to get about 2,531 calls in per day. Okay, so that's about it for this one. So this information is pretty useful, and we're going to piggyback on this value to actually determine, okay, how many staff do we need for each one of our customer lines.